lots of slides with Rob, and I think it might take up to an hour. It's kind of longish. We'll try to go less than that, but we'll see how it goes. So brace yourselves. It was a long trip. So I'm going to talk for a lot of it, and Rob is going to cover a piece in the middle. And I guess I should share a screen. That would help. Okay, can you see the screen okay?
Yep.
All right. So I guess my motivation, hold on, I have some sort of a window here. My motivation for this trip was to go to places that are a little less traveled. Something that was on my horizon for a while was Melville Sound, Elu Inlet, Bathurst Inlet. I learned about these places when I was teaching in Cambridge Bay from Doug Stern, who lived in Cambridge Bay. Um, Also, I for a long time have been looking at Quantoito Lake on the map. And Rob, can you mute everyone, please? And Bailey River. Lots of people love the Bailey River. It's kind of way out there. But yeah, so this was sort of my starting point. And then sort of the big research started. Like I had to look at what's happening with the water levels, the effect of climate change, what was impacted by the fires around Yellowknife previous year, and what's the prognosis for water levels and fires for the following year. And then of course a big job of finding a crew and making the whole thing happen. So we did find a pretty good crew. It was a kind of a long job. We only finished like I think in March, so we didn't have all that much time to get organized, and we missed a few things in the end, important things, sort of in terms of discussions, not what we brought. So I was fortunate to paddle with a few people who I know very well. I knew Vladi very well from Ontario. Chris, I did a couple of northern trips with. Rob, I did a couple of northern trips with. And the new people for me, well, Seth, I have talked to. He lives in Yellowknife. He's a teacher. I have talked to him for years about various trips, but this was the first time I paddled with him. And then Catherine was referred to me through a friend, and Shauna contacted me online, and Doug found me on through the WCA because I put a listing. So yeah, people came from different places, and we had a lot of Zoom calls, and figured out what everybody's skills were, and then figured out what the route should be based on that. Also, we were trying to fit into a budget of like 3,000 to 4,000. And of course, we had to discuss our gear and food and safety. And we went to Palmer's Rapids for a warm-up. So very comprehensive preparation. Um, the the gear and food preparation was well, in particular, the food preparation was a little chaotic before we started because a few of us decided to buy the bulk food in Yellowknife, and even though we gave ourselves like a day to finish all the packing, when six of us got to Seth's house in Yellowknife, trying to finish the packing, and a couple of our packs came late with one of the airlines. Yeah, it was a bit overwhelming. That's an understatement. But we did manage to pack everything, and we didn't leave anything behind. The route that we in the end chose was starting on McKay Lake and going north into the Hood. This is a comparison with a trip I did with Rob in 2016, where it was kind of a similar thing, a short flight into the Emil River, and then we worked our way north into Lake Napaktulik, and then we did the Hood. So this time it was through the Upper Coppermine, Itchen Lake, Rocking Horse Lake, into Napaktulik, and then the Hood. This is just an overview of the Hood itself, which finishes in Arctic Sound of the Arctic Ocean. Yeah, and here I guess I would mention that the reason we chose the Hood was I was trying to get to the Bathurst Inlet, but I looked at trip reports and talked to people about the Alice and Western and Burnside, and it seemed like none of it, because of the low water levels, it just didn't seem to me like it was worth going that way, even though I really wanted to see the whole Bathurst Inlet. In the end, we chose to do what we knew from 2016, which was the Hood. And this was the ocean part. So we crossed the north part of Bathurst Inlet, went into Melville Sound and Elu Inlet. Then we did a short portage into the Queen Maud Gulf area, and then we got a boat ride to Cambridge Bay. The crossing, if you would paddle it, is about 30 kilometers, and we didn't want to paddle that in canoes. So this is our first part. It was 3.5 weeks, and overall, I would definitely call it route less traveled. Some of the sections we had almost no information available, perhaps just knowing that somebody went through there, but really nothing specific. But McKay Lake was a place that's certainly a good starting point. We got there with Air Tindy, no problem. Seth was very tired because he just finished his school year, and he really only packed for the trip just before we took off. So yeah, it was kind of tight for him. And we plan on a pace of 21 kilometers a day and expected about 60 kilometers of portaging. Don't know how many kilometers we portaged in the end, but it was a lot. Shauna suggested we bring sails, and they really did well for us. We had lots of western wind, so that was a good decision. McKay Lake was pretty kind to us. We eased into the trip, fished a bit, got to know each other more. This is the map. We started on McKay Lake before that with Dot when we went to the Hanbury, so was revisiting all old grounds. It was fun. We started the trip on June 27th, and the ice went out of here about mid-June, so was a good timing. Could have started even earlier. You see this section going north into Courageous. That was one place that we had very little information about. Was kind of lake hopping. And it was a very difficult stretch. One of the trip participants called it hummocks from hell. Very challenging. It was also very buggy and hot, and the guys discovered this new sport of cooling themselves off in bug jackets. Yeah, it really tested us because our packs were heavy, and Yeah, it was exhausting and very hard ground to walk on. We made it to Courageous Lake, where we had a little bit of a pause because it was windy. We had very few windbound days on the trip, but this was well timed because we needed to rest. There's a beautiful long esker there. And we proceeded north through this section that is kind of little lakes and creeks, and Seth has traveled through here. I read about it a long time ago as a way, it was a way to get into the copper mine, and I remembered it was difficult, and it was difficult indeed. Um, Sort of portaging the takeouts and the put-ins, very very kind of difficult. Yeah, you have to carry your packs basically into the water. The canoe, the loading always uncomfortable footing, and so we had to have, sorry, good humor to get through it. Vladi came to this saying that don't wait for, oh, I missed the life. Don't wait for life to happen, wade to live. So uh, whenever we needed to laugh, we talked about wading. Um, the reality of being in the Arctic set in very quickly with all this portaging. Two people in our group could not really carry their packs, and neither could they carry canoes. So the group had to deal with it. The way we dealt with it was that these people cooked all their dinners kind of right away to lighten their packs, and we had to help them out in terms of carrying the canoes.
Eva, I have two questions from two folks. So the question was, did you take three pack boats, and how is traveling with the pack boats with the folding canoes?
Okay, thank you. I'll address that at some point. Um, so I guess we got some wind, and then we had to stop um, because of the wind, but also because it triggered something in one of the trip participants, and and it quickly kind of became obvious that a northern trip is what I have always seen is as being, which is a more like a healing journey or spiritual journey or a form of somatic therapy, where the difficult physical work brings stuff in people, whatever they need to work out their old hurts and stuff like that. So, and then the whole group, which is like a little family created for the summer, needs to deal with this stuff. So it did. It became pretty quickly intense, like working not just with the challenges of the trip, but also what it was bringing in us. The guys did very well with their bonding and coping through this challenge by pipe smoking. That's Vladi and Seth in the picture there. So one of the techniques we employed as it started being windy and we needed to keep moving, we started paddling at night. We kept checking the weather on the inReach. It was super beautiful on this particular night. This is the Stephanie Lake just coming into the Coppermine. We ran a few rapids on the Coppermine, whoever wanted to run them. And then we got into this area called Obstruction Rapids, super beautiful stretch of rapids, but because of the huge rock at the bottom, it becomes, the whole thing is unrunnable. So it was a long portage that started kind of okay, and then it ended in this big boulder field with willows, and it was very difficult footing. So the hard physical work kind of continued, and some people started, I guess, discovering their old injuries. Some of them were injuries that they didn't share with us. So yeah, you could see the strain that the train put on us. Then we got into Point Lake, which is pretty. It's pretty long as well, about 100 kilometers. Lots of Canadian shield rock. We were tired, but doing okay, progressing. In the second part, we got a fair bit of wind. I can address the pack boats a little bit. They're a bit slower than hard shell boats on lakes. Definitely feel it. In rapids, they're pretty good, other than you cannot crash into rocks. They maneuver well. They're prospector design, so and they are pretty forgiving in high volume rapids if you have a spray cover, because they bend. They stay on top of the water. And now we're going up into the height of land to Itchen Lake. And of course, because we're going up, we're losing water. So lots of rock fields. Again, like we had to be very focused with our walking, because we're always putting in and taking out in these boulder fields. We could paddle stretches of it solo, so that saved us some portaging distance. Overall, pretty land. And we didn't see many animals until then. We have, I guess, tried to figure out our leadership, how to do it better. And one thing we started doing was looking at the map in the morning. We had also lots of discussions about the whole route, whether we can finish it at all, because we have been working so hard. Yeah, I put this note page of times, what the winds looked like. We had to work all the time with the weather, and at times we had to go to bed and wake up at like different times, so it also added to the challenge. So the leadership was one of the things we didn't do. We didn't discuss it enough before we took off on the trip, and I normally do that. Somehow time-wise it didn't work out, and really I have to know that it's very important to figure this part out before you take off for the trip and put yourself into hummocks from hell, because then it becomes tough, tougher, much tougher. Portaging into Rocking Horse was another big unknown. Basically, Seth just found a place on the map which was closest from the little lakes in the Itchen Lake area and Rocking Horse, and drew a line on the map through a few little lakes. But amazingly, it was actually a good route. We could paddle those lakes, and the portages were mostly dry tundra. So here we got a break. And Rocking Horse is pretty. It was hazy, so we couldn't see clearly, but you're getting into this beautiful sort of higher land with some higher hills. So it was a place where we felt more optimistic. It was nice to have gotten to this lake. And then from Rocking Horse, we had to cross to Napaktulik Lake. That was something we knew just a little bit about. There was a book that David White wrote called Hummingbird from Resolute, and they went from Contuito, and he writes about this beautiful sandy river, which was indeed there, but then they made a hole in their canoe. They used a very light canoe, and the end of the chapter on this stretch, just he talks about fixing the canoe. So we really didn't know. Fortunately, we had a few extra days at this point, so we could deal with the wide variety of the terrain. Yeah, there was like a nice sandy river, a lot of rock fields, chutes, this kind of stuff that was unrunnable. So lots of vegetation still around to make the portaging challenging here. We ran some rapids. And then at the end of this stretch is a 1 kilometer long canyon. It's a portage over a hill. The footing wasn't too bad. But I guess the most amazing thing about it was that we were getting to the end of part one on time and getting to Napaktulik Lake, which is very, very beautiful. And it was the second time for Rob and me to get there, and we were very grateful to, at least I was very grateful to get to that point. Again, so Anapaktulik actually means, this is according to Google, the place where there are trees, and there were pretty sizable willow trees, as Seth is showing in the picture. So we had always good firewood. Original name of this lake is called Takijuk, which means vein or tall in Inuktitut, though I don't know if this was meant for the name of the lake. On the map, you will see both names. So it's kind of confusing, but it's the same lake. We had to rebuild one of the pack canoes because something shifted in the seat that we couldn't fix unless we took it all apart. So that was one big job. We had to figure out what gear goes out and what stays with us and say our goodbyes. We did a bit of hiking, kind of, I guess, did final reflections for the women who were leaving. We had about, I think we just had a day there. We had to also find a place for the plane to land. That's Catherine before she left. And then we got a resupply, and Doug and Rob came with Amic Air. So animal-wise, so far we have seen a few caribou and a wolf on the stretch going to Napaktulik. Really very little, very few large animals. Very few birds also. Saying goodbye to the women and getting our food, somewhat short of salami because it was difficult to communicate over the inReach with all the food orders, but also the weight limit was pretty much maxed out, or rather overmaxed, so we couldn't have really brought more food, so we had to fish. So this brings us to a very different feeling part of the trip. The first part definitely was stressful for me. There was a lot of storming and norming and figuring out how to do things and if to do them at all, while the second part was far more smooth and free of tensions. So Doug came, this is his first Arctic trip, and really all he had to learn was how to clean dishes with a moss. That's a joke, but yeah, he fitted in the group pretty easily, and the rest of us were working well, and Rob um Rob knew what he was coming to, so that was also very easy to fit in and make everybody working smoothly. For the Hood River, we had 25 kilometers a day plan and 2 weeks, which was somewhat rushed in hindsight, but we chose to uh, create a lot of time, a lot of extra time for the ocean because there is such huge wind exposure. So these are the choices we made. We enjoyed Napaktulik Lake, and then we continued doing this portage into the Hood, which is a little kind of a marshy creek where you have to drag your boat for a bit, and then Hamaki portage. Not a great portage, but if you go up this way, spending time on Napaktulik Lake is really spectacular. So it's worth doing this portage. The lakes at the beginning of the Hood welcomed us with western wind, which was perfect. We knew what this first stretch, the top Hood, was going to be like. So rapid-wise, here you have numerous class 1, class 2 portages, and they're rapids. But they're really only runnable if you go at the end of June or like first week of July, I would say. At this point, you have to portage these rapids, and then you have some chutes, like class 4 ledges that, if you have the skill, you can run them. We didn't. We portaged, so a lot of portaging, some lining. Yeah, so the upper Hood is like 2-3 days of portaging, lining. Beautiful country. Kind of scouting how to go about it. We were crossing the river in the pools, trying to cut off, walking around big bends. Um, new portaging strategy for us. Lots of rocks, lots of good focus to be safe. This was one of the hardest rock fields we had to cross on the upper Hood. Very sharp rocks. Crossing from one side of the river to the other here. One of our camps. And the upper Hood is over on Esker Lake. This is where the Hood River gathers into a bigger trough and picks up speed. And there's this gigantic, truly gigantic esker. The men or boys had some fun up there. Kind of a new section in the trip again is starting. And the eskers continue, which provided for also not only nice scenery, but also good portaging, footing. The hood is beautiful. We wish we had a little more time, but we didn't. There are a few waterfalls on it, which are pretty and great for fishing. Doug got to fish. We started seeing grizzlies in this, especially in around this. Okay, I'll read the word. Kingaunmute Falls. After these falls, we saw at least two grizzlies with, I think, two mothers with two cubs. And then a bunch of them on the lower hood as well. So in the lower hood we saw maybe like six grizzlies. We had a mushroom break. Chris collected a bunch of mushrooms and Vladdy cooked them. These were mushrooms that Vladdy knows. Vladdy is Russian and knows his mushrooms, but Seth ate a lot of them and reacted badly to them. So we had to stay at Mason Rapid, which is a class 5 unrunnable chute at this beautiful place and rest it. We really needed it because we have been working so hard. Other than for Seth, it was it was kind of a good break. So we got to fix some gear and chill. Shortly after we met Frank Wolf on a rock here with his partner from Italy. It was a busy year on the hood. Jim Baird, as you guys mentioned, was on the river. Frank Wolf, oh yeah, with Arturo, that was his Italian companion, and we also ran into Centennial Expedition, which was a camp. It was a trip to commemorate 100 years of Camp Kuchiching. And so the six campers did the hood and we met them on the trip. It was their last week of the trip when we met them, so they were very fit. They paddled shirtless and it was just really awesome to see such healthy guys out there in the wilderness. We started taking our shirts off afterwards so that we could also be looking so great, but I'm not sure if we ever could. Then we got into sort of more longer stretches and more challenging stretches of rapids, more or less the kind of stretches where it's almost impossible to scout. You just have to make your decisions as you go. And I was paddling, I think, with Doug and kept looking back, and I saw always Rob and Vladdy behind us until I didn't, or rather, I saw Vladdy and Rob stuck on a rock. So, which is where I will let Rob talk about it.
Yes, so this is where we file the incident report. We'll take a pause from the trip and just kind of reflect back uh, and learn from the event. And as you can see, the boat it's pretty banged up from hitting a rock. But I'll spoil the suspense. There were no injuries. The boat was successfully repaired. Trip finished. Everything was good. But before, so Eva, next slide, please. Yeah, so we're just going to talk a little bit about pool and drop versus Arctic rivers. So a lot of us Ontario folks, we're used to Canadian Shield rapids, and it's a little different. Next slide, please. Yeah, so quite often with pool and drop rapids, so here's the Madawaska River. I'm sure most of us are familiar with this, but quite often there's a good chunk of bedrock, a big drop in elevation, and the river has very defined V's and edges, And generally, you get a nice, fun little roller coaster ride. Worst case scenario, you get a little wet. If you capsize, you usually get flushed out to the bottom where it's pretty safe. You do the swim of shame, but it's not so bad. And quite often with these sections, you get out of the boat, you scout, you plan, you execute. It's pretty much your plan's pretty much scripted. But with these Arctic rivers, they're a little different. Next slide. Yeah, so here's a classic S-turn in on the Hood River. So quite often, because of the eskers, the riverbanks is different, where there's a lot of cobbles and gravel and sediment. And because of this softer material, the river carves these big, long S-turns. There's a lot of class 2 rapids, and it's generally a slower descent. And because of this, you have these long rapids, so you're not always able to just get out and scout and make your plan. So quite often, you're just boat scouting on the fly. It's more of a slalom course, so you slowly go down, you back paddle if necessary, and you're constantly on the lookout for rocks. And one of the other snags with these rapids is quite often we call them guard rocks. There may be a better technical term, but quite often at the end of the rapid, there's quite often a sieve. There's not always a clear line. So it's very tempting to see a good rapid. Yeah, I got this. And then stumble upon guard rocks at the end. All right. And so one of the strategies is, well, first off, let's just break the myth for a second. Where a lot of us are hardwired to think, well, the person in the back drives the boat. Well, that works well for lake travel or pool and drop if you scout, make a plan. But on these types of long class 2s, it's best to lead from the front. So in this case, your bow, if you have the option, put your best river reader in the bow. They will have the best view of the river. And the other thing is communication is so much easier because you can communicate with either pointing or draw strokes and cross draws. Alternatively, if you're in the stern barking out, go left, go right, you may not always hear that over the wind noise and the rapid noise. So I prefer this method where if I'm in the stern, Eva's in the front. If I see her doing a draw in a certain direction, I know to go, hey, let's go. She's doing a cross draw, let's go left. And if she does it frantically, I know to go a little more speedy. But if it's a casual, then I know we got time. And the third strategy is for the sternman to just yield control. Because once you're in that rapid, there's no time to discuss. So a prime example might be like, we're in the middle of the rapid, and I'm like, I think we should go left. And if the bow person says go right, you just go right. Because the worst thing you can do is indecision and hit a rock. So it's best to just yield control and stick with what the bow person decides. And now the snag with this is that sometimes you'll have a new person and they're not quite ready to lead from the bow, but still give them authority to make evasive lefts and rights. And with these slalom courses, there's usually no right answer. It's just make a decision, right or left, whatever's your good side, just don't hesitate, make the call. And so the snag we had with this approach was very similar, where a long class 2 rapid, I had the new guy in the front. And once we were nearing the end of the rapids, there was just no clear line where there's just a mess of rocks, waves. It was hard to really plan a route. I had very low visibility. I could basically just see the back of my bowman's head as we were bumping around. And they started to panic, where their strokes were getting sloppy and flailing. The boat started drifting to the left. And that's when we broached and hit this rock broadside. And instantly water was filling in the stern and the boat was warping. It's a horrible place to be in, to physically see your boat getting crushed. And for a split second, you try to use your little biceps to push off the rock, but No. No, it's not an option. You can't fight the current. So next slide. So in this case, it was time to abandon ship. Thankfully, I had my tow line with me, so it was literally clip in. The throw bag was already tied to the stern of the boat, so I basically clipped in, and we got out of the canoe and just swam. And once 300 pounds, once two guys and 300, basically 300 pounds were out of the canoe, it was able to drift off the rock. I swim to shore, reel in the boat because it's tied onto me. And one of the successful things that happened as a group was that everyone stayed calm. This could have been a disaster. It could have been a yelling match. And so there was no blame whatsoever. Everyone was part of this, where the group never scouted. Me, the stern man, lost my line, and my bow man was starting to panic. So just focus on solutions. It literally took all of us to figure it out, and one problem at a time, we got the boat back together. And so the first step, full disassembly, and because we got to start from scratch and start rebuilding the bent pieces. So in this case, we have all these bent rods. They're very similar to tent poles, where they're all shock corded together. And in this case, we sacrifice the low priority parts to replace the high priority parts. So these sponson rods on the side, they just give they add with stability, but we just sacrificed them. Cut the bungees, reuse all these pieces, and then use these rods to replace the critical parts, the gunnels, the keel, the chime. And it was pretty straightforward. And then next was a broken rib, where the metal tubing broke sheer in half. And sometimes you think of, oh, we're going to fix this. Maybe we chop up a willow branch and slice it and splint it. But actually, the secret was actually in this pile of junk, where with all these broken rods, with the pipe cutter, we were able to cut off a little bit of this insert and then splint the broken rib back together, and then just clamp it with vice grips, file off the rough edges, and it was a perfect splint. And alternatively, there's been on another trip, we had, oh yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah. So on another trip, there's an alternative method to splint, where we had some PVC conduit tube already in the toolkit, like pre-cut. So with these broken ribs, it's splinted with the tube, and then we wad in some marine grade epoxy, added some self-tapping screws for extra rigidity. Problem solved. And lastly, there were two warped ribs. They weren't broken, but they were just completely deformed. And one has to be careful because you can't physically bend aluminum back into place because it's a very soft metal and can easily snap back into place. But full credit to Eva. I don't know how she figured it out, but she was able to bend the ribs back into place by kind of working it in a sandbank, just so the pressure of the sand distributed the force more evenly. Next, please. And I won't read all this out, but basically duct tape won't fix all your problems. A substantial toolkit is needed. And I like to keep it all in a Lexan box, just so jagged things like drill bits or pliers won't puncture a dry bag or anything. And self-tapping screws, they're handy for various fixes. And in a pinch, if you have to remove old pop rivets, the screw will work just fine. And then, yeah, next slide. And then, as I said, it took a lot of calm patience, and we got it all back together in about 3 hours back on the river. And just lastly, the next day we realized that we needed to change partners. And that's because, frankly, we were a little shell-shocked, where there's a hit in confidence and you're just a little on edge. So it's best to kind of split up the team and have a little reset. And thankfully, yeah, back on the river. All right, Eva, you want to take over?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, I'll go from now. Yeah, so we also had to figure out how to get ourselves down the rest of the hood that has many rapids and is fairly technical. So what we figured is that we send a boat that has good experience first, and they basically like will signal to it was Vladdy running with Doug at this point. Should Vladdy be running it or not because he had the least experience. And then if it wasn't a good idea, then somebody else would run it twice, and that really worked very well. We should have done it from the very beginning, but anyways, we got to it when we got to it. Yeah, lots of fun rapids, technical rapids to run. I would say 1, 2, 3, mostly 2 and 3. Some of it some of it was these fans we had to wade, um, or just do short portages in some sections. So yeah, it was a lot of getting out of the boat, scouting, constantly being in the water, walking in the water a lot on the side, lots of work. I guess a different kind of work than portaging. We did well, some lining as well. But yeah, it's continuous white water until you get to Katimanap Kurlua, which I would read it in Inuktitut, formerly known as Wilberforce Falls, which is a real treat. I consider these the most beautiful falls in Canada, even of course I haven't seen all falls in Canada, but these are fabulous. Red granite, they fall in 3 sections, kind of facing in different directions, so you can never see the whole depth of the fall. These were peregrine falcons nesting there in a safe place above the falls, and this is inside the canyon below the falls. Rob and Kurt ran the canyon in 2016, and so 4 of us had to try it again this year. It was slightly higher water. What it takes to get into the canyon is to go down this crazy steep slope without throwing down rocks on whoever is below you, and then running a few chutes with this beautiful scenery. It was actually possible to scout down there. This is a bit of a video running one of the chutes. Fun stuff. Portage along the falls and the canyon. Almost 4 kilometers, I'd say. And this is jumping to another set of falls, which is, well, kind of a chute. There are two more small waterfalls or chutes below Wilberforce Falls. Same reddish granite. And here I wanted to remember Doug Stern. He paddled the river in 1994 with his group and ended up staying in first Umigmaktuk, and then eventually he moved to Cambridge Bay. He decided to go skiing today. He lives in Western Canada, I think on Vancouver Island, but he inspired me to go into these places along the coast. So I wanted to show this slide. And at this last set of falls, we did one of our fishing sprees. So just wanted to show you a few slides of that. Everybody was helping out. This is my biggest fish of the trip, so it was really fun getting it. Took about 20 minutes, and then the guys helped to fillet it and cut it up to pieces, and we enjoyed it for the next 2 days. All lake trout on this trip, really fantastic lake trout. This is the end of the hood, quite pretty. Our last campsite on the hood. And Doug has managed to carry this wooden chair across all the portages. We did not believe that he would, but he did. He still has it. And this was end of the hood and putting on the spray skirt, getting onto Bailey's Bay. We had I think it was a 4-kilometer crossing, pretty calm weather. It was really beautiful. So we collected some wood at the end of the hood, and then we crossed Bailey's Bay and got to this place where there's like years of deposits of little sticks. So the land was incredibly generous to us. We almost always had little sticks. And then at the very end, there weren't that many sticks on the shore, but there were 2x4s from the dilapidated cabin. So we always had firewood, and it was always nicer to have fire, either to keep bugs down or just it's much more fun to cook that way. The land was also generous in terms of getting drinking water because, of course, the ocean is salty. And so we had to periodically stop at these little streams coming in. Not all the streams had water. We found them on the map, and I would say 80% of them where we stopped had water. So we didn't really have to carry a lot of fresh water with us. The picture on the left shows us gathering water from these. They were kind of pools, but it was still moving water. We sometimes took water from just little lakes, but mostly we tried from the streams. The nice thing about the streams was also that they had often like a bathtub or like this bigger pool of water before it emptied itself into the ocean. So we would go for a dip in the ocean, and then we would use that fresh water to wash off the salt. So it was really nice that way. This is an example, the picture on the right of the creek coming in, and a bit of a deeper pool, which we can see, and there's the ocean on the right. We saw footprints of bears. We also saw some bears in person, grizzly bears again, minding their own business. We saw a lot of these guys. They were very friendly and followed us. It was really fun to have them around. We saw a lot of amazing rock formations. Really such a vast variety of rocks, different colors, different shapes. Every island we went to, every bay we went to looked different. It was truly fascinating, beautiful country. On this island hopping at the north end of Bathurst Inlet, there wasn't that much water. So that's the one area where, yeah, just probably the only area where there was less fresh water available. We didn't really do any large crossings, so I think our biggest crossing was like 2 kilometers. So we just followed the shore, and my comfort level is I don't know, I would say 100 meters. Joanna was asking, some people go further away from the shore. My experience is that the wind can pick up anytime, so I just don't really, I just don't go further. It's as a principle. Great hiking land, and we finally realized that well, because of where we crossed the islands from Bailey's Bay, we had less kilometers to paddle than we thought we did, and also we really had amazing weather. These are some of the rocks. Yeah, we had amazing weather. We did not, we had some wind on the ocean, but very little. I think we had built in like five, we could have had 5 windy days. That's what happened to Karsten last year. I think he was windbound in like one stretch of time for 5 days. So we were ready for it, but we didn't need it. So we had a lot of time to hike. And when we got wind, it was mild wind and it was from the west, so we sailed a lot of it. So it was like really miraculous, um, given the vast stretches of the ocean. This is Doug getting ready to do that 2 kilometer crossing into the Umigmaktuk area over here. It was a bit wavy at that point because there was the wind was blowing from the south, and there is yeah, at least like 40 kilometers for the wind to create waves. So that was one kind of an more challenging place as far as the waves went. This community is where Doug Stern spent, I think, about 10 years living with the Inuit, and he learned the traditional skills that I got to observe when I worked in Cambridge Bay. When we went there, there was nobody. People obviously used some of the buildings. At the time when Doug was there, he said there were 60 people living there. Umigmaktuk means muskox. And by the way, we have seen 0 muskox on this trip, which was shocking. This is a school that's falling apart in Umigmaktuk. And yeah, this is an example how we sailed. Sometimes it was hazy. There was kind of this lure of these islands, as if they were gonna hide us, but really they could hide us for about a day, but the rest was like an enormous exposure to, like, here you can see 35 kilometers. Yeah, like 20 to 40 kilometers of the sea. So basically when it started blowing, you would have to get off the water. Chris and Seth has left us about a week before we finished the trip because Seth got he got a new job as a kindergarten teacher in Yellowknife just before we took off for the trip. And his job was supposed to start a day after we were supposed to finish the trip. So he wanted to prepare. And we were okay with splitting at this point. We had lots of time and there was no big risk to the group as in two parts. So then it was just four of us, Rob, Bloody, and Doug and me. And we took our time enjoying the coast. Stopped at a lot of beaches. We climbed on all the hills that were on the way that we liked and just chilled. We just started paddling much slower. This was one bay that had some very old tent rings. A nice hiking hill. And Rob's camera that took some of those lovely videos and pictures. Towards the end, towards the Elu Inlet, we got into an area where we finally started to see a lot of birds. And we saw and heard all kinds of loons. I think we just about heard all the loons that exist except for the common loon. So here I can identify a yellow-billed loon. This is probably the Arctic loon, and this is probably the red-throated loon, and they make crazy sounds. But I won't play it because we're going on pretty long. Anyways, amazing creatures. We had lots of fun listening to them. And lastly, this is the mystery of Elu Inlet. We were thinking we're coming to this is end of August like 19th, and we're thinking really it's like 30 degrees Celsius and there is still ice out there, but it is not ice. It's this crazy large amount, like beach after beach after beach of seashells. And here I just wanted to appreciate Vladi. This was his first Arctic trip. He did 8 weeks and he did super well. He fixed his shoes with a wire and they also lasted. And also wanted to appreciate Doug. Also his first Arctic trip. He just did the second part, but he did super good. Had really good attitude and helped us to make it work. And I won't share about the boat ride in Cambridge Bay, but want to say thank you to all the people who taught me and helped me with information to prepare for the trip, and people who inspired this trip. And all of you who love the sense of adventure and you get out there, and also Wilderness Canoe Association that helps us to put on these shows. Oh yeah, and Miriam, this is an amazing caribou. It's from McKay Lake. It was a caribou that was not shy. She stayed with us in the camp for about 4 hours. She slept there. She ate with us. I mean, she ate her own food, but it was pretty amazing. We even named her, but I forgot the name. And Chris took amazing pictures of the animals. We saw quite a few of caribou. These really healthy looking male caribou, probably 10 of them throughout the whole trip. Yeah, and that's about it. no muskox as far as animals. Very surprising. And if you guys have any questions after we leave this call, feel free to find me. But now we'll take questions.
Okay, actually, there were quite a few questions that came in. So I'm hoping it's okay. I'll just go through some of them, Eva.
Yes,
And if
please.
people have others or follow-up questions, they could unmute and ask.
And
It's
Rob, also jump in if you.
Yeah,
you-
absolutely.
Is Chris here on the call? I don't think so.
don't know.
No, I don't think so.
So there were several questions about equipment, and Andrea's just said it was a wonderful presentation. It was a beautiful, what a beautiful place. So there are questions about equipment. So we'll start with that. Did you take a bug tent? Was there firewood? And yeah, why don't we start with that?
We took your amazing buck tent, custom cooks, buck tent. It was buggy at times. Thank you, Dodd. And firewood, yes, there was a lot of firewood. First part we used 1 gallon of fuel. Second part we used about the same. Yeah, but you could have just not bring fuel. You could have
managed.
sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then there were some questions about the decision-making process. So I'll lump them together. Like, how did you make the decisions together with that first group? And Eva, were you the default leader? Did anybody question this?
I declare before going on a trip that I do not wish to be the trip leader, but what happens on trips when you organize it, you know a lot about it, so you kind of to some degree have to lead it, and people want you to lead it, and it's a tricky dance. Yeah, we tried to make decisions together, but also at a point when somebody is sort of stressed out, they sometimes want to control things. And when they are not familiar with that kind of landscape, travel with that kind of landscape, you also have to, I guess, create some boundaries around what their input means, or the weight of their input. So it's a tricky dance, and one thing I really, I have reflected a lot on the trip, and I think if a new person comes into a challenging trip like this, it's good to go on a pre-trip to like figure out how people work together and do some team building. And also, what am I trying to say? Yeah, I think building more team building, but people have little time, I guess holiday time, so it's challenging to do, but it would be a good idea to do if somebody is new to the Arctic, because the environment truly is it's challenging. So
Okay, thank you.
I think I missed a little bit in there, but anyways.
And whoever asked those questions could just follow up on that.
Yes, please.
Okay. There's some more equipment questions, like did everybody have dry suits? Full dry suit, half dry suit? What did they wear?
Rob, can you answer that?
Oh yeah, there was two of us that had semi-dry suits, which was nice because, and frankly, it was Vlad and I that had the swim. We had semi-dries. It was great. Our favorite piece of gear up here is the dry pants, because there's so much wading and lining where you're constantly getting wet. And also with the pack boats, you never want to ram them into shore and get out. Usually, you always want to float them in a couple of inches of water and start putting the packs in because you have to be gentle with these boats. So if you're able to stand in knee deep, thigh deep water, it just makes life easier. So with the top I had, it was a semi-drive, so it kind of meshed. It kind of tucked into the dry pants, so you'd still get a little wet around the waist, and the top was neoprene instead of latex, so it was more comfortable to wear all day. So there's two parts to that where if you had hard shell canoes, you may be tempted to put a dry suit on and run more rapids. But with the pack boats, you have to dial it down a notch. So you're generally not in big water that you need a dry suit for. And lastly, with that, with the amount of wetness, it's also possible with these rapids, there's often the wet line and the dry line. So if you plan on riding the dry line, you probably don't need a spray deck. You may just need the dry pants because you're paddling more conservatively. But again, if you want, put the helmet on, plastic boat, you can charge down the wave train and have lots of fun and get wet in the process. So there's two options for the same river essentially.
There you go. Good questions and good answers. There was a question about the repair kit. Did you have it divided in one or put in one box in one canoe or divided between two canoes?
Oh, good question. Yeah, usually you want redundancy in your kits, but in this case there was just the one big repair kit. And generally everyone also will have a multi-tool. And I always keep gear aid in some pocket somewhere in a life jacket, just in case there's a tear either in a jacket or a dry pant, just so you could instantly unzip a pocket, do a quick patch anytime, anywhere.
Nice. That's great. We noted that on the river, a lot of the times you didn't have the spray skirts on, but on the ocean you did. Was there a reason to not have the spray skirts on the river?
Well, generally just because you're in and out with all the portaging and such. And that goes back to the wet line or dry line style of paddling. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with the spray decks. They're very handy in the big water. But the Hood River is kind of a little on the low. Well, this year and the other years, the water levels have been so low where, again, different style of paddling where there's just less volume.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
and for the Wilberforce run, one of the boats did put a spray deck on, but even I opted not to.
Wow, easy. um, Jean-Claude just popped you a question, Rob. A
Mhm.
request to forward the list that was shown on page 77 on the slideshow.
Oh,
Can you check
absolutely.
out that message and follow up with him?
Absolutely.
Okay, there's an interesting message, or two of the questions. Would it have helped to have a drone to do the
Oh,
scouting down the river?
actually, in 2016, that would have been a godsend because the upper hood was so dry. We didn't know what we're up against. And frankly, so again, 2016, we have our notes, we're trip notes, and there's a bunch of these class one, class two rapids, and you're like, oh yeah, no problem. We'll just sail through this easy section. But it became a hard section because it was all now portages, and you weren't sure to just do these little lining maneuvers or to just put the packs on and hike over the river bend. And this year, with our knowledge, was just like, it's going to be shallow. We're going to be walking. Just accept it.
That's how it is.
So in this case, we didn't need the drone per se, just because even I had been on the river previously.
I
And
just,
Very
frankly, oh, and
so,
lastly, scouting the canyon by drone would have been fabulous. Because when you're at the top of the canyon, I'm sure you all know the waves look a lot smaller. Like, oh yeah, no problem. That's child's play. And then once you're at river level in the canyon, you're like, oh shoot, what did I sign up for?
They were small. We were supposed to be small. And
I will answer the question about the changes I got initially, because you're talking about the dryness. So the one thing I noticed that was very different from the previous years, and I haven't been in the high Arctic for a while since COVID started. So yeah, what is it, maybe 5 years. That was the last time. So I certainly noticed a huge change in the dryness of the land, like whatever has marsh-like vegetation or wetland-like vegetation, I always look at it with binoculars and say, oh yeah, this is not a good place to camp. It's going to be wet. But pretty much for the second part of the trip, any of these places that had wetland vegetation on it where we landed on, they were actually dry. So I would think it's the permafrost melting and
Right
the
now.
the land is drying. And even like whenever we camped, I remember on my first, or in the beginning when I started going to the Arctic, the pegs in the morning you would touch them, they were frozen cold, and this year I never felt the peg being frozen cold. So the level of permafrost, the depth is certainly
It's
different.
changing.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a bit disconcerting.
Mm.
So I'll do the two questions one after the other. Somebody's asking, what is a gosling meal? And did you see any polar bears?
Uh
I'm
no.
having pictures of a baby goose. Oh dear.
Yeah, so in the end, we didn't really decide to put pictures about the Gosling meal in there, but Chris and Seth had this interesting event happening that as they paddled on their own ahead of us, and we were all hungry at the end of the trip, they had I believe it was an eagle dropped a Gosling in somewhere near them, so they plucked it and cooked it and ate it.
Is that an omen? An eagle dropping you a meal.
Yeah,
That's I
and
have
no,
never heard
no
of that.
polar bears.
That's a good thing. Now, is that one of those things that it's possible but not probable?
The polar bears?
Yeah,
Mm, not really possible in this time of the year.
there you go. A good news.
And frankly, that was one of the selling points of like no polar bears. This was my first time on the actual Arctic Ocean, no polar bears. Very excited.
Oh,
And
a
also one
relief.
note about this section was there's no tide. It was only about 10 or
What?
20, yeah, only about 10 or 20 centimeters. It was so low that we didn't bother printing out the tide table because meh, it was so small. But mind you, this is just a guess, but because there's basically no tide, there wasn't much of an intertidal zone, and that's a hive of like biodiversity. So I'm wondering if there's just lower, like just not as much life in this section of ocean, so there weren't as many seals and therefore not as many polar bears. Only a guess.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
seals we saw, like it was amazing. They'd often swim behind the canoe for like an hour, utterly magical. But we never saw like big pods of seals where you see like in the East Coast and West Coast. So I'm guessing other sections of Arctic Ocean would be more alive with belugas and
Mm,
such, and seals and such.
yeah. So somebody was asking where are all the polar bears? Well, they're in a different place with more ice or looking for more ice. Yeah. Um, there was a question about the weight of the pack boat compared with the weight of a Royal X or hard shell canoe.
Well, I'd say about 55 pounds for the pack canoes, which is a treat. They're much lighter than ABS.
I was thinking mine was about 75 pounds, but if I took the spray skirt off, it lost about 10.
Hmm.
But yours is 55.
Just to
Yeah.
just to guess.
Ballpark. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Um, and there's a question. Oh, someone is asking, did you take a firearm?
Seth,
Um,
Well,
Seth
in this
did, yeah.
case,
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
in this case, yes, Seth brought a mini shotgun. I forget if it folded, but it was very small. The magazine only held 2 shots. Uh, and yeah, there was a debate at the start of the trip, and he opted to bring it and carry it, so that's good, because I didn't have to carry it. Um, and there's often the gun debate. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a debate, and one of the snags is that if you have a group of 6 or 8, there's only one firearm, and you're never sure where it is on that portage trail. Where if you arm every boat with banger, anyways, it's easier to give people a bunch of bear bangers and bear spray than it is to have just one shotgun per se.
There you go. Somebody was asking why no bug shelter? I thought you took one with you, Eva, or no?
Oh, yeah, there was a bug shelter.
Yeah. So there you go, Catherine. There was one. Clark is asking, would a spray skirt have minimized some of the damage on when you broached the canoe?
Oh, quite possibly, because the worst part is the water flowing into the boat, and I remember literally turning around and just seeing this flood of water pour in. So, and it's the weight of all the water that helps. There's just this massive water, and as the boat fills up, the canoe bends faster. So
Quick.
yes, less water would have meant more time to react. So yeah, quite possibly would have helped.
There you go. Things to, yeah, balance between each other. Someone was asking about what are your plans for next summer? Eva?
I have many routes researched. I'm still kind of settling from the experience of this summer. It was intense. The first part was intense. And feeling into what I want to do. I have a 3-month long window. I'm thinking going into Nunavut Lake and out, or visiting that Esker country again, southeast of Great Slave Lake. But yeah, I have no firm decisions. I'm just thinking more with whom I want to paddle. But yeah, I definitely want to go up there. I love that country.
And you know what? I think at this point I should just be quiet because maybe there are some folks who still have a question that they would like to ask. I've
Okay.
just gone through all the ones that were posted. So thank
so
you
much,
very
Doug,
much.
for doing that. I appreciate it. That was super good. Yeah, just jump in, guys, and ask away.
I have a question. I'm wondering who picked you up out of Cambridge Bay? I see Doug Stern is online too, so he'd probably be interested as well.
Who picked us up? To be very honest, I don't remember the name. But if somebody is interested, they should email me and I can let them know.
So, okay, I have a question, Eva. Would you do that the lake travel part, between the lake hopping? Was it fun, or was it just a way of getting you into the hood?
As far as an approach route, there are all kinds of terrain you can go through. I have gone through. I like the variety. I like the challenges. I personally would, in order to get me, somewhere. It's like it just creates for a variety of let's say train, and it makes you overall fit. I like the variety. I don't mind it. What is difficult is when people have expectations that are different than when they get, and then you have to deal with the challenges with that. But yeah, as far as the route itself, that's what you get sometimes. Sometimes you get hammocks. Or you have to look for the portages, it's not obvious where to portage through, but it's all a part of being up there.
And also, if you were planning to visit just the Hood River if you were to get there like 2, 3 weeks earlier, the lake travel would be a lot easier. Where the class 1, class 2s we portaged at the start, you could probably just float on by quite easily. And I think that's going to be the snag with a lot of the Arctic rivers, where with climate change, we just don't know what the water levels will be like. And frankly, when you read Bill Mason's story of the Hood River, I think he ran it in '86. He's talking about cold, wet, damp conditions, and we had the exact opposite. And also, there's the story of Bill Mason running Wilberforce Canyon, and he almost dies because there's whirlpools and just this whole crap show of big waves. Yet at low water, it's completely manageable.
Anybody else? I was thinking, I ran it in, I think 1999, and at that point it was, oh brother, cold, wet. We paddled off into a sleet and blizzard one morning, and that was not unusual. So,
and was there ice on the lakes at the start?
Some of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question, you guys. Is there anybody here who paddled with Doug Stern on that trip in 1994?
Doug Stern's here, but I don't see anybody else who was with me on the trip.
Okay, tell us something about the trip, Doug, or about Umigmaktuk.
That's a big question. Oh, I mean, you'd have to be more specific. I can't. One thing I would say is when we finished the going, we didn't paddle the canyon of the Hood River, but at the end of the canyon where we put the canoes back in, I found some beaver cuttings. They must be in the visitor center there in Cambridge Bay because I left them. And one long lost beaver was chewing on some willows, those big willows that were growing at the end of the canyon there. And I just thought that's one of the strangest things you'd find.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a bit about what you learned from the Inuit when you lived with them in Umigmaktuk?
Okalaktunga inuinaktin makiumakimi ayungnaktuayok. So I learned a bit of the language. That was a great thing to learn to get a different world view of things. But you were talking about leadership, how they do leadership. They just pick leaders as needed, and they never weigh down one person with everything. So a leader could change depending on what activity you're doing. So there was all kinds of things, but probably the most fun was the eating. Eating the type of our diet, the traditional Inuit diet was just so much fun. Like to see a whole pod of warblefly larvae get boiled up and then you drain the water off and have them with salt. I just couldn't believe some of this stuff. Unbelievable. Lots of fun.
Well, I really admired the skills you had, that you learned from them. So thank you for sharing it then, and thank you for being here today.
I was curious what you ate. Like, I'm sure you had your fill of lake trout on the way down the river, but once you got to the ocean, did your diet change back to freeze-dried stuff, I guess?
Well, we fished in the lakes, inland lakes. We got some more trout. That was smaller trout. Yeah, I was curious if we could have fished in the ocean. Yeah, but I didn't want to use my freshwater equipment in the ocean. So, yeah, we just ate our dried food on the ocean and a few smaller trout.
And lots of berries, I would assume, the crowberries and blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots of blueberries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we missed that. And how long for the whole trip?
8 weeks. We did 8 weeks.
Well, such a rocky start. I've seen some other person's trip on the upper Contoido, and it was so rocky that they just had to call for a plane. They couldn't get to the ocean, basically. They couldn't get started because it looks like the water levels have just dropped so much, as well as the animal populations. Like the lack of muskox and caribou now is just unbelievable from when we were up there. Catastrophic declines.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what Marianne was saying. Similarly, they did the western hoping to get to Bathurst Inlet, but they turned around.
The Western River.
The Western River, yeah.
Oh, I always thought about that one too, but people used to live at the mouth of that in the old days too.
Hmm.
Did you see any cliff swallows on Napoctali, just where you leave the lake at what would that be? That would have been the south. Well, maybe you didn't leave from that part, but there is a place on Napoctali that has a whole bunch of cliff swallow nests stuck to the rocks.
We didn't see that, no. We entered where the canyon entered southeast part of the lake.
That's where the cliff swallows are in that little canyon.
Oh yeah, we didn't go into the canyon. We ended up the portage like 500 meters south of the canyon. So
Yeah, that's an amazing lake. People had stories of an Iqaluit that used to live there, a creature. And in the old days, they said it came up. There was a guy kayaking on the lake, and it grabbed him and took him down. So some of the big lakes, not all of them, have Iqaluit in them. These giant creatures. And I used to ask one of the elders in Baychimo, George Kupton, what it was, and he says, "Well, I don't know." But I said, "What do you think it might have been?" And he says, "Maybe a giant lake trout, but we don't know."
um, somebody was asking me, Doug, what you were paddling in. Was it a kayak or on the
Well,
hook?
down the Hood River, it was with Bill Gould, and it was a half credit course for the University of Colorado students. So we were paddling these, they were like they were called canoes, but you paddle them one person per boat, and they're inflatable like a Zodiac. So if you wanted to leave the river and go hiking for an hour or two, you had to let some air out or they could explode, right? From the heat of the sun because they were black, but very forgiving. We could run almost every rapid. It was so like that last rapids on the Hood River. We ran, or not everybody. I ran it, but very forgiving because they're basically big floating zodiacs.
Are they like pack canoes where you put gear inside the outer air-filled ring?
Yeah, the two rings make up the canoe, so they have pointy ends to them, and they're very they would pack down and 40 pounds to pack them around like Wilberforce Falls. So that was the great thing about that is they were light to pack, but the thing is they were super wind catchers. So I swear half the girls on that trip went down backwards because it was so windy and it was very hard to muscle that boat down when it was windy because they were so high up off the water, unlike a canoe. So they were not easy to paddle in wind.
And probably difficult to paddle in flat water as well.
Oh gosh, yeah. But they were forgivable. So he was taking down university students who had maybe no whitewater experience. So that was kind of like how he could pull off these trips.
Eva, there's a message from Yuri. If you can follow up with him, he's asking if you can share the slide deck.
Sure. I will do my best to copy and paste all the chat and see what's in there. I'll try to do it now, actually. It will let me.
I used to read that there's a fish creature in Newton Lake, so beware.
Okay, I'm sure it's such a big lake. And there must be so many fish in there too.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah, I would think so. Not too many people get in there.
Yeah, that was there was besides Napoctalik, McAlpin Lake, which is the headwaters of the Perry River, and Newton Lake. I heard that people would not kayak on those lakes in the past because of that, because of those creatures.
Amazing.
Yeah, make you
Well,
think.
that would be wise. I'd stay clear. But down here we have Mimigwese, so you have to watch out for your canoes anyway.
Yeah.
They don't pull you down under though. They just sneak your canoe off the shore.
Right. Any other questions? Anybody?
Just your bug problem with the warming temperatures in the Arctic and the tundra getting crispier, but would that just make the bug problem even worse, having warmer temperatures?
I have what I have watched on in the last few years that you can get really bad bugs even in August.
Yeah.
So yeah, yes, but I mean overall what applies is as long as there's some wind, you have a reprieve from the bugs. And I think the bugs were kind of like on and off. It wasn't, yeah, there wasn't like somehow predictable, to say there were bugs because of certain temperatures or there were bugs in certain areas. Um, yeah, I really didn't observe like some general rule about bugs. Overall, um, I I don't think the bugs were too bad, other than the very beginning when it was hot. That was noticeably unpleasant, but the rest of the trip I didn't find it oppressive or unusually oppressive. Like when I think about paddling the Dubond, it has some sections where the bugs are bad, but I don't think the hood does.
Yeah, I always heard horror stories about the back river for bugs.
Hmm.
How many groups would you have met on the hood altogether then going down? I think we met 9 different groups in 1994 going down there.
Oh, wow. Well, we met two groups, and we know there was one more group. Then, well, and there must have been also Blackfeather because they do a guided trip there
Oh
at the
boy.
end of June, beginning of July. Um, yeah, but that's all we know. I mean, it's a very expensive trip. It's very remote, so I don't think that many people go up there.
Yeah, definitely cost must be just knocking back all these kind of longer or more remote expeditions.
Mhm. Yeah, that was one of the wonderful things that we had a group of six, because that really makes and being able to end up in Cambridge Bay rather than flying out in on a charter plane, it made
Yeah.
the cost very reasonable.
Yeah, that's the uh the thing that would work there. And it was just a boat ride from the other side of the Tiburon Isthmus then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's where George Anglehite took as his cabin. It wasn't George, was it?
It was probably his son. What's the last name?
Anglehite.
Yeah, yeah, that's the name.
Yeah, okay.
Eva,
And
there was one hard shell canoe on your trip. How did that one get back to southern?
Oh, that photo was of the hard shell was just for reference.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Just because it had a good picture of the cross draw for reference. That's all.
Did you see much mining activity as you crossed Roberts Bay in Elu Inlet there in Melville Sound?
Oh,
Or Melville Sound, I guess.
well, I know there was the Hope Bay mine that was operational.
Yeah,
So I didn't notice it paddling by it. Doug noticed the I think the fuel farm, the giant tanks. He noticed them from a distance. And frankly, on our Air Canada flight back to Yellowknife, we flew over the mine site and you could see
right.
the infrastructure. And yeah, but from the water we couldn't see too much. And maybe two or three helicopters, which I assume were from the mines.
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to do surveys back in there, in behind Hope Bay where the mine was, and it was the highest concentration of gyrfalcons in Canada.
Oh my
Used
God.
to be. Don't know what it's like now.
We did not see very many.
Well, most of their nest sites are not on the coast, though. There's only the one at Perry Bay. I think that's on the coast. Most of them are, like said, the all those basalt cliffs in Bathurst Inlet. It's an eroded basalt plateau. So all the cliffs, they're not really from fault lines so much as it's a plateau that's been eroded. I guess it's eroded along fault lines, but most of them are inland from the coast. There's only a couple that are actually like right out on the ocean.
Okay, so I assume put that on the to-do list if we ever go back to it's further south of the Bathurst Inlet section.
Oh, Lordy, they have just
Oh,
some
cool.
incredible nest sites. The golden eagle nest, the gyr falcons. Well, they don't really make a nest, but them and the peregrines just use a cliff ledge. It's the golden eagles that make those stick nests that some of them can be like 6, 7 feet deep and 5 feet in diameter. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Makes you wonder how old they are.
Oh my God. Oh, so multi-generational nests, I assume?
Oh, uh, I think they could be over 500 years
Oh
old. I
my
was
God.
just asking a biologist from Yellowknife, lives in Victoria now, if they've ever been dated in any way. Like maybe you can date one of the sticks at the base of the nest, or I don't know. But no, he didn't have an answer. But we figure they're many, many, many hundreds of years old to be
Oh,
that
that's
big.
amazing.
Hmm. Well, if somebody wants to go on a trip to Bathurst Inlet, I would like to go back there.
Call me.
It's a pretty amazing place. And thank you so much, Doug, for telling me about it and inspiring me to do that. It was truly, truly fabulous.
Well, the Hood River, especially being so full of trout, makes it such a nice. It's a pretty river. It's just a pretty river with all those terraces along it, and the way it finishes off with the Wilberforce and Lower Wilberforce. It's just a beautiful country.
Yes.
Oh, and people, yeah. When you see the tent rings, did you see all the tent rings at the mouth of the Hood River there? It was called Katimunna, and when you go right around from that bay at the bottom of Arctic Sound to the mouth of the river, it's nothing but tent rings once you get up close to the river. Old tent rings, and people, you could tell that there was just a huge, huge settlement of people there, like for a certain time of the year. We used to go there to pick cloudberries all the time with the people from Bay Chimo. We'd always boat across and pick ockpicks and look for caribou.
Huh. Well, we didn't see them, but the guys on the call here who are going there next year, hopefully we'll see them.
Yeah, great memories. Oh, I'm just now you've woken up all these memories now.
Hmm. Beautiful.
That's what these trips are good for.
Yeah. All right. So I'm thinking one last question if anybody has, and then we'll wrap it up.
Just quickly, it's not, I've just copied all the text and sent it over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Dot. That was fabulous help. Mm.
One last
Okay.
question. I can't remember, what years were you in Cambridge Bay?
2011 to 12.
Okay.
Okay, I have one last question. Eva, what's one thing that changed you on this trip? Or one way that you changed on this trip that you haven't changed on the other trips that you've done?
Hmm.
Any revelations?
I don't know, maybe it's still coming. Honestly, I haven't finished processing it, but I was kind of shocked that, I'm 58 and we had to work so hard on the first part to kind of compensate um for the other two people. And my body just became stronger and stronger, and my spirit, well, I was challenged in my spirit, but I just so enjoyed the process of like becoming stronger and then I realized it's so important for the mental part as well to be physically strong. And it seems like a superficial value, but I just realized what an important thing it has been for me in my life, and more so as I age, to keep in shape and to be strong. It's just life is much more enjoyable that way, taking on challenges.
Totally agree with that one, boy. Body strength is so important as you age, so you can still enjoy the things you like to do.
And make good decisions and all that. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
things seem easier. The brain works better when the body is strong and when we're getting up.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, thank you guys. That was awesome. So nice to see you all. Goodman, you haven't said anything. I love you. Lee, love you too, out in Portland or wherever you are. Joan,
Yeah, great
hi.
show. See you around.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Eva.
Good
And
night, guys.
Thank you,
Pleasant
Eva.
presentation.
Great to see you.
Bye.